Which Hat Atelier is one of my favorite manga ever, and the anime is currently airing, and it's literally one of the best adaptations I've ever seen. I had my doubts that they'd be able to deliver. After all, the manga is the most visually stunning manga I've ever read that utilizes this medium in unique ways that are hard to replicate in the medium of anime. But the people at Bugworks found a way to make it work. Basically, I'm going to go over the first 6 episodes in depth and just point out all the great details and smart changes that they made that not only replicated the story, but brought lots of new aspects to it. From the music, to the lighting, to the animation, and use of colors, I think that this anime made the best out of all the advantages of the new medium, while also smartly bringing over many of the little touches that made the original great. There will be no spoilers past episode 6 of the anime, and I will just be covering the first 6 episodes in this video, so this is safe for anime onlys who have watched at least that far. But anyways, let's get into the video. Be sure to subscribe for more video essays over anime and video games. Let's go. Starting off with episode 1, one major thing that this episode does is that it only includes background music whenever there's magic involved. All the ordinary moments in Coco's life, like hanging up the sheets and eating dinner, are just ambiance and the tactile sounds of the world. But whenever magic is involved, whenever the carriage flies overhead or the stones light up, the music swells. It's such a simple but genius way to separate the ordinary from the magic. But while magic is wondrous, this episode also makes sure to show the way that ordinary people like Coco get to make some use out of the magic, with its uses in their life being completely ordinary, just a pond that cleans itself. Magic is both convenient every day, but is also wondrous. Whenever Coco is concentrating on cutting the cloth, the white background emphasizes her concentration. And you know what, that rule that I just established for the episode? Well, it breaks here. And the music plays while Coco cuts the cloth for Keyfree. But actually this isn't an exception, as it actually emphasizes that what Coco is doing is real magic, as Keyfree states, and highlights this important moment for the future. And onto the flashbacks. Wow, they are beautiful. The choice to make the framing for the flashbacks a book is smart. It preserves the unique borders of the manga, and making it into a pop-up book is cool. It makes it look better in motion. The flashback's lighting is very saturated and warm, and while the dark room that this brim hat is in stands out as darker, it's still colorful, with greens and purples adorning the shadows. And it's all brought together with these painterly backdrops, like a book or a hazy romanticized memory. And for a minor change that's kinda fascinating, in the manga, Coco knows from the start that the wand is a pin, but she never figures out that magic is drawn until seeing Keyfree. While in the anime, Coco doesn't realize that it is a pin until after seeing Keyfree. Perhaps the anime staff decided it was more believable that she would simply be very careful with the wand, and never try out copying any of the drawings inside the book. This is a very small detail to change, so it's interesting that they did it.
じゃあ、お家に帰るまで光り続けていたら、ここにも魔法が使えるかもね。
In this scene, I really love the harsh cut in the middle of Coco's mom's sentence. It's quite different from how the manga handles the scene, but it adds a nice gut punch to the anime. And right on cue, the music is back with the magic. A pretty major addition to the anime are the extra bits of domestic life of Coco and her mom. And yeah, these are a good touch. They help to build their relationship a little bit more before the end of the episode, and also slow down the pacing of the episode a little bit. But also an anime original scene is that her mom starts to say something, but then cuts off. I have absolutely no idea what her mom was going to say here, or if it's important, but I thought it was interesting to note. Whenever Coco goes to write, the choice to have a pure white background is interesting. Perhaps it shows focus again for Coco, or maybe it's just to make it a less noisy scene and emphasize the messiness of her lines in ink. Also, the drop of ink thing completing the circle is anime original, but it works well. It does show not tell for introducing the spells must have a circle completed to work, and it also gives a nice build up for Coco's first spell. This is 100% personal bias, but I massively prefer the 2 panels of Coco's reaction to the magic in the manga, compared to how they did it in the anime. Something about the way it's drawn just captures the immense wonder in her eyes. It's always been a very evocative panel in my opinion. While the anime's version is solid, it doesn't quite match it, even with the added sound, color, and motion. However, her little dance afterward is hilarious. I was not expecting her to start crouch spamming. Though looking back at the manga, she actually was doing this here as well. I just didn't catch it. And the last few minutes of the first episode are perfect. The slow build up of the music, the way the wonder slowly turns into dramatic tension for the audience, and all the eventual horror with, to be honest, a little bit of hype that the last scene brings. And the way they take this panel of the darkness moving towards Coco and make it first person, both metaphorically and literally from Keyfree's perspective, is very awesome. It was a really clever way of adapting one of my favorite panels in the series. It's also nice how whenever Keyfree flies out the window, the anime gives you a while to look at his shoes and figure out how the flying shoes work. It's nice whenever stories give you hints for things before outright saying them. And this shot with him flipping them over and her horrified face being revealed is also particularly dynamic and great. Kifuri dropping Coco is also an anime original detail, which is a great change for the anime. It keeps up the motion of the scene, emphasizes her struggle, and results in this fantastic shot with her reaching out towards her mom while being held back by Kifuri. Kifuri also subtly shows a lot of sides of his character in these last few moments, mostly through his tone and voice acting. His anger at Coco for using forbidden magic, his kind tone whenever dealing with a grieving child, his cold following of the pointed hat rules, and his scheming side that takes Coco in partially for his own quest of vengeance. I think this first chapter and episode will always be a bit of a compromise, as it's very difficult to make you feel bad for Coco's mother as a unique character just within the tiny space that we have, and it's also hard to make Kifuri's reasoning for taking on Coco as an apprentice not seem like a bit of a jump. But all in one episode, I think it does a good job of establishing Kifuri as a complicated but incredibly kind character, while Coco's mom is a pretty basic character, but at the same time it's hard not to feel for her and Coco, and the beautiful music certainly does help sell the scene. Finally, the huge zoom out at the end is a fascinating choice. I don't really think that the world, like the physical land that it takes place on, is a huge focus on Hat Atelier. While specific locations are interesting, there's never really a focus on how they're all connected like a setting like Middle-earth has, which you would kinda expect with this being the final shot of the first episode. However, it is a really pretty ending shot and it has a cool storybook look as well, which I can never disagree with. And for episode 2, the book visual continues to be really neat. It is a good way to put an establishing shot for the first scene. And now it's time for the opening. The song is a banger. I like how it has both female and male singers, and though it does fit the idea of a basic anime opening song pretty strictly, the fantasy-esque instruments do stand out. Almost all the shots from the opening, especially at the start, pull from the manga, usually from the artworks at the start of each chapter, which is a really neat way to reference these unique, often symbolic artworks from the manga that wouldn't fit anywhere else. And the opening employs a very heavy use of borders as well, giving it a very physical feel. And the quick flashback that goes from her childlike wonder for magic to literally growing up and being shadowed by the brim hat is a great way to contrast Coco's love for magic with her newfound knowledge and her fear of its forbidden side. Also, whenever it fades to water and she is pushed away, the ripples shape into what looks like the brim hat's eye, which is a crazy little detail. The shot with all the witches drawing shows all their individual skills of penmanship. Coco's steady straight lines, Riche's small precise sigils, and Kifuri is watching from the side. However, I have no idea who the top left person is, and I can't for the life of me remember anybody using this weird tooth wand in the manga. The opening also heavily uses these painting frames as imagery, and here it seems to reflect Coco being an outsider to the atelier and magic world. And here we seem to see the same thing, but with which Coco looking back at her past self. Maybe through a mirror this time. I think it's also kind of supposed to represent window ways in the stories as well. Throughout the manga, but especially later on, reflections will become a very important symbol, which I'll talk more about later in this video, but generally I think they are supposed to show how people change over time and how changes in one's environment, like Coco not growing up with the privilege of magic, can change a person in relation to their peers. And of course, it ends with the book, which is being written in with Coco's pen. This reflects a theory that many have had throughout the manga's life, that Coco herself is actually the one drawing the manga that we are reading, explaining its style of illustration, and there's also a decent amount of evidence to back this up. From this promo image, and though we sometimes use hands that are drawing it using different wands, in the final shot of the opening, we actually see a full lineup of wands that look like those used by the other characters, so perhaps Coco is using all their wands to draw it. Pretty neat, eh? The lighting through the first part is also very purposeful. It's the dawn of a new part of Coco's life, and at first it's all shadowed, while Coco tearfully reflects on how she promised her mom that she wouldn't leave her. But then, as they enter the atelier, sunlight begins to filter in, the music builds, and Kifuri comforts her through the use of magic. Lighting like this is a big strength of the new medium, and the show takes great advantage of it. However, it's time for my first complaint. In the subs, with a Japanese voice, Tetsuya's voice is painfully high-pitched. Also, I'm not gonna lie, I listened to a little bit of the dub, and Riche, Agat, and Tetsuya's dub voices kinda suck. Tetsuya just sounds so fake, while Riche sounds like she's 90 years old, and Agat just sounds too old as well. But more like an adult and not a 90-year-old. I don't know, I just felt it was kind of a weak dub. However, an interesting detail with the translation is that while Tetsuya still refers to herself with her full name instead of a first-person pronoun like I in the Japanese voice, the anime subtitles and the English dub don't reflect this, and instead just use I. And apparently referring to yourself in third person is a trope in Japanese media that is usually meant to show that a character is immature. I personally find it a little annoying whenever it's translated, though knowing the cultural background does make it a little less weird. It's just not something that translates to English all that well in my opinion. So I don't really feel too strongly about them not translating it. In here, directly adapting the sick-ass panel was a great choice, as it looks even cooler with color and motion. Same with the whole flashback sequence. Sometimes just directly lifting stuff from the manga goes well. And whenever Agat flies through the window, the anime continues to put a lot more focus on the circle on her flying shoes being important than the manga does, leaving tons of visual hints. Agat's design is very different in the anime than the manga. It kinda reflects how she'll look later on in the manga. But early on in the manga, she has a somewhat edgier look, with messier hair, shadowed eyes, and more realistically portioned facial features, rather than the more anime-looking version, which contrast heavily with the other characters. I honestly prefer how the manga did it, as it really makes her stand out at first. Plus her hair does look sick. But I get that the anime wants to keep it more consistent character design-wise, plus animating that hair would probably be miserable. I do like how she gets kinda creepy music though. One very important thing the anime onlys must be informed of is that the magic toilet was cut. The toilet through which you can see the galaxy has been removed from the anime. Truly, the atelier has fallen. Though the meal scene with the beautifully animated bread is anime original, and it helps make the atelier more cozy, so that kinda makes up for it. Also, I do like the addition of the dinner and the night, as it makes this episode round out the first full day in the atelier, and really makes it feel complete, going from early morning to the place lighting up to it becoming nighttime. I think these changes were nice additions that give Coco some more quiet moments and ease you more into the story. Another thing I can't help but notice is the increased focus that the anime puts on Coco's mom. While the manga occasionally mentioned it, the anime adds scenes like this night one, plus a decently big change in the next episode, which is an interesting choice. Also, this whole scene of Coco accidentally shooting water at Agat is really well done in both the manga and the anime. It juggles a ton, introducing the mechanics of the spells, setting up Coco's struggles with magic, showing off Kifri actually teaching the girls, building more tension between Coco and Agat, and showing off a better side of Agat's character, demonstrating how perceptive she can be and that she is generally a good teacher. But also, this manga panel and this shot directly show her towering over Coco and looking down on her and her magic, and it establishes the initial hierarchy between the two. All this in the space of like a minute or a few pages. And the final shot also mirrors the one that I just pointed out, with Agat leering over Coco, but it's a bit different. In the manga, Agat looks kinda creepy, while Coco looks downright terrified, and it seems that they toned it down in the anime. Which makes sense honestly, because I know they have to do anything they can to keep people from absolutely hating Agat. Early Agat treats Coco like garbage, so it's really easy to dislike her, especially as we've just seen Coco go through so much. Establishing a rival character early on is a super common anime trope, and making some people treat the main character like garbage is also a good way to make you root for them, and I think it's done pretty well here, but I also think that the anime slightly toning it down was the right move. Especially with the increased focus on Coco's mom and Coco's struggles with that taking over more of the role of the conflict for these first few episodes, Agat doesn't really need to play as heavy a role as an antagonist. Though once again, the plot points aren't actually really changed from the manga, it's kinda just the framing, so she is still pretty much the antagonist. Still, if any anime onlys really hate Agat, I get it, but give her some time. She's one of my absolute favorite characters in the series, and that's saying a lot, as she has a lot of strong competition. On to episode 3, where the first real change for this episode is how Coco has a lot of trouble just getting out of the forest to the ball range, while it literally happens instantly in the manga. I'm not sure I like this addition, to be honest, as I feel like realistically Coco should have no trouble walking through the forest. She's not super clumsy or something, and she grew up around forests. I guess it's just there for the pacing, and they give the episode a little more space before getting to the Dagda range. These two shots are really clean. First using the reflection to show the water and the orb things, and then panning up to show Coco looking at the water. And then the second cut that shows her reflection and then pans right to show her looking up. They're very creative shots that just look nice and dynamic, and once again continue on this theme of reflections. And also, whenever Coco finds the brush buddy, it doesn't actually mention that they are drawn to magic, which is kind of an interesting exclusion, as I'll have minor plot importance in the future. And later on, whenever Coco is almost given up, I like how the anime really emphasizes the moment whenever she considers using forbidden magic, especially with the creepy music. It's very important to show how Coco has been impacted by her brushes with forbidden magic, and the anime does a great job of marking it a little more prominently. But a very strange change here is that in this imagery, Agat has long hair from whenever she was younger. I guess all of them look younger in this scene. Unlike the manga, I suppose the anime wanted to show that the 3 other apprentices had upbringings as witches, unlike Coco. Though it is interesting that this is the first time that we see Agat's long hair, as that's kind of established later in the manga. Also anime original is this transition between the boat and the pigment stone, which is a very creative and a nice visual bit for the turning point of the episode. There once again is an increased focus on Coco's manga in this episode. While the manga does have a line about her, this whole section of the anime is filled with imagery and dialogue about her, and I really like this change. It makes this whole sequence more emotional and connects it to Coco's past. As while the other witches have special magic past, she also has her own background and skills that she's built up. And finally, rather than just being Keyfree behind her, this now also has her mom, guiding her hand. And visually, this is an absolutely genius way to show the time passing. The manga already had a fantastic panel of its own for this, but the anime chooses to make it look like a long exposure time lapse, showing the stars' movements in the sky, which just so happen to make circles, the very foundation of magic. And after this, the flight sequence in the anime is fantastic. But if you haven't read the manga, then you should know the panels here are absolutely peak. They don't do the whole flipping the boat part, but this first one just has so much power, while the second page is so hopeful and has a great sense of motion, as the flying sail thing eases its ascent. Though the choice to make it look almost like a camera stuck to the boat is really fun in the anime. The whole sequence is also a lot longer in the anime, and once again uses a lot of imagery of her mom. And finally, to end off the episode, the sequence of her putting on the robe is very lovingly animated. Once again, these animators are just so good at making the world feel tactile. It puts a beautiful bow on a fantastic episode. And now for episode 4. And oh no, the tits are gone. I suppose Japanese TV just has much stricter policies on artistic nudity than the manga had, as this isn't the only time the very subtle or obscure nudity in the diagrams and stuff from the manga is removed from the anime, as now the Fire Lady has a shirt and shorts on. Though I will say, the original has a pointier silhouette like Fire because of the nipples, which was pretty clever, so it is a bit sad, if an incredibly minor omission. Maybe the live-action Netflix series in 2036 will add the tits back. The artistic nudity in the manga definitely seems to reflect the sort of illustrated manuscripts and frescoes and stuff that the art style the manga draws from, and that attention to detail for the unique art style really sets it apart from any other manga that I've seen. And also in the manga, one of the best page layouts that I've ever seen period is used to introduce the town of Kaon. And yeah, just look at it. Unfortunately, it's basically impossible to recreate this in the anime, although this shot as Agat walks away is really cool. And whenever they go into Nonoa's shop, the lighting is darker than a place like the Atelier, but it's cozy, with some white light filtering in and highlighting the silverwood tree. And then whenever Coco sees the brim hat, the sudden silence is great, like a reverse jump scare. And then as she chases him, the town becomes a Scooby-Doo chase, which is pretty clever, especially with how it hides the transition into the pocket dimension place. And finally in the manga, the dragon stands out so much for looking realistic and detailed. It doesn't look like a normal part of this world, and it contrasts very fiercely to the students. And so, while overall the dragon is very similar in anime and manga from this point on, with the anime getting a lot more movement obviously, I do think that something was lost by making the dragon in the anime fit more in with the general art style. As the dragon in the series starts as something monstrous that is only beat once Coco starts empathizing with it and seeing it more like a scared animal rather than a monster, and the way that it's drawn demonstrates this change of perspective. Finally, I will also note that Tarta's silver eyes are a lot more apparent in the anime. You know, due to the color. And the first detail in episode 5 that really stood out to me was how the happy music that plays during Tetsuya and Coco's bonding session is interrupted by Agat popping in and giving unsolicited advice to Tetsuya, also interrupting the moment. I guess it's just her way of showing support. Even if it is cold, both the dreamy, romanticized style of magic of Tetsuya and the practical style and hard skills of Agat are necessary in order to be a good witch. Another neat detail is that Coco draws out her plan with a rock like the ones that she has used to write on fabric in the past. And one thing that the anime cuts out is that initially Agat realizes that Coco was operating with the idea that her plan will probably not work, and is instead trying to find a plan which is safe and likely to put them in minimal danger if it fails. Which I think is a kind of important moment for Agat's understanding of Coco, is she's disliked her up to now with a reasoning that Coco is unskilled and will fail constantly and put everyone else in danger, and therefore she should just give up. But Agat didn't consider it from Coco's perspective. She didn't consider that Coco was genuinely smart enough to approach tasks carefully and willing to put in the work to make difficult things happen. I go more into the character of Agat in my old character analysis video, but the summary is that the reason that Agat dislikes Coco is because of her own insecurities. Agat wouldn't be able to function in this world if she lacked skills similarly to Coco, and she is frustrated that Coco is just seemingly ignorant of just how bad she is at being a witch. Translating puns from languages is one of the toughest things to do in localization. In this scene, whenever complimenting Agat for her idea of using sand for the clouds, in Japanese Tetsuya says Sasuga Agato, and then riffs on that to make Sasugato, combining Sasuga and Agat's name. Sasuga is a weird word that roughly translates to as expected, and in the context of the scene, she's basically saying that Agat is being as smart as expected. So a direct translation would just be something like an implied "that's a great idea" is expected from Agat. But that's way too long and not punnable. The official manga translation for this is kind of bad in my opinion. It turns it into "way to snag it, Agat," which only rhymes if you pronounce Agat is Agit, like "way to snag it, Agit," which is weird. And yeah, the English subtitles for the anime went for Smarty Yacht, which works quite a bit better in my opinion, though the dub goes for Smart Thought Agat, which might be the best solution overall, honestly. It's a very smart choice to make it visibly turn at night as they get stuck working on a spell. It makes for a great visual for whenever Coco gets the fireball working and it casts a light over the place. Just like her repetition puts the idea of using her repetition sigil into Agat's head, and of course this whole last sequence is very perfect. Pure hype moments and aura. It's the first part of the anime that I genuinely think is heads and toes above the manga. By no fault of the manga, but the animation, sounds, and direction took a solid end to a decent arc and bumped it up to a legendary episode. And in it, the shot of Coco reaching for Agat is very similar to the one of her reaching for her mother in the first episode. Again, a subtle way of pointing back to that initial tragedy. And also in the manga, we didn't actually see Coco react to Agat falling, so I think it's a nice addition. Though this time, Kifri is able to save Agat even if Coco is still powerless. And of course, the piss dragon is absolutely ridiculous. And after this, the crazy black and white effects and music with the brim hat eye guy are very menacing and memorable. The anime really does a fantastic job of him. And as the happy credits music begins to play, it's all wrapping up, and then bam. Just like before, a silence jump scare. Although this time, it's got a ringing sound as well. It's the first time we see Kifri acting like this towards a kind person like Noa. The first of the more ruthless side of him that we see. Though we'll see more of it in the next episode, it's no wonder why people like this character so much. There's such a delicious sense of mystery to him that'll only get more explored and also more explained, but it continues to stay interesting as the series goes on. And finally, episode 6, a more low-key one which doesn't have too many adaptational changes that stood out to me. However, the first bit with Coco making noise and Agat going outside to make it beacon is completely anime original. However, it does show Agat drawing without looking, which is a hint towards an important plot point later on in the episode. And way later in the episode, perhaps this detail is kinda obvious, but whenever Coco presses Orugio's panel, it lights her up with the exact same color palette as the flashbacks, which is a nice touch. And this shot with the water reflection isn't from the manga, but it continues the theme of reflections that's been shown throughout the story. Coco as a witch versus Coco as an outsider is the main one. It seems that one of the main themes of the manga is how different things could be if you were born or lived through different circumstances, and how a character like Coco, who's lived both as a witch and someone who lacked magic, has a unique and valuable perspective on the world and magic. And finally, at the end of this episode, this is where Agat begins to take on more of a role as a main character alongside Coco, rather than just a partial antagonist for her, and where Agat's character really begins to shine. But that's it for this episode and video. So what do we learn? Well, Hat Atelier's anime is very, very good. Not just because of the wonderful animation, sound, and the music, but also because of its insane attention to detail, inspired direction, and careful changes that really take it to the next level. I'm of the belief that any good adaptation has to change some stuff in order to fit the new medium well. And while the anime is incredibly faithful, I hope that I've done a decent job in showing off just how many small things are moved around in order to make it a more smooth transition from print to television. This video only covers the first 6 episodes, so if people are interested, I may just cover those last 6. Be sure to subscribe and like and comment for that. Also, perhaps a video covering recent events in the manga is needed, as my old manga video is getting pretty old, and some major things have happened. And finally, shout out to Big Joel. It's his video covering the terrible live-action Avatar show and how it pretty much just completely fails as an adaptation served as the inspiration for this video, although mine is pretty much the complete opposite. Thanks for watching. I have more videos over anime, including this response to a terrible Freegreen review or my first Hat Atelier video. But that's all. Bye.